Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell. In this podcast, I talk to the finest quality people from in and around comedy, and most especially comedians, who talk about starting out, what they've achieved, and importantly, what comedy means to them. Sometimes we reveal glory, sometimes we reveal tears, and sometimes we merely reveal crippling inadequacies in sound quality. I love talking to people in and around the comedy world about comedy, and if you'd like to hear what they have to say as much as I do, then please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast. This is the first episode I've recorded face-to-face on location. We're in a South London cafe, familiar to my guest, who is an award-winning stand-up comedian, boasting multiple sell-out runs at the Edinburgh Fringe. She's also a mental health ambassador and frequently talks about her own mental health experiences in her act. It's stand-up comedian Juliette Burton. How did comedy come into your life?
Comedy came into my life in lots of different ways. When I was a child, I used to watch Sesame Street and got obsessed with the Muppets when I was a little bit older. And I used comedy as an escapism through watching the Muppet movie, the 1979 version, a lot. I also watched loads of different comic book inspired TV series and comic books, which always have humour in them. And in my teenage years, I used comedy as an escapism. Watching Monty Python, getting obsessed with them. It was a way of finding my sense of self. It wasn't introduced to me. My upbringing wasn't really theatrical or comedy based, but it was a way of me finding light in the darkness. There was a lot of other things going on that weren't very funny or happy, and therefore, perhaps my obsession with comedy was born out of a place of surviving. So when I was in and out of hospital due to mental illnesses, I would gravitate towards watching comedy. And I think that was my mind's way of trying to find a way of balancing my experiences. Then when I was in, we'll probably come on to my mental health experiences, but being in and out of hospital meant that I fell out of education. I loved drama at school, loved performing from a really early age. I now realise that was a part of the mental health coping mechanisms as well. But being able to persuade and direct and guide a group of people was something that I loved doing from a really early age. And the mastery of being able to be on stage and be a conduit for that energy in that room, and being able to hear that laughter, that lovely tension release of a group of people is just one of the most beautiful sounds, and harnessing that energy and storytelling. It's all storytelling. When I was in my early 20s, I'd already fallen out of education due to hospitalisation, not being allowed to go back to different schools because of my mental health experiences. Eventually, I started studying journalism. We don't need any A-levels to do that, apparently, if you write a decent enough written personal statement. Journalism led me to radio work, which led me to voiceover work, which led me to acting. I still do voiceover and acting. Acting led me to realise that I was getting cast as the love interest and the sex interest, and I didn't really have a personality or a voice in any of the roles that I was being cast as, and that pissed me right off. So I started writing my own stuff, which very quickly led me to comedy. And then it took off, and I think that in terms of the mental health and comedy, there's a bit of a segue in that well, firstly, today is World Mental Health Day. Happy World Mental Health Day. Every day in my world is Mental Health Day. But when I was telling my friends about my mental health experiences, I quickly realised that the darker the experience, the more necessary it was to laugh. So if I was able to find a way to present to people that I just met and wanted to share these experiences with, if I were able to tell it in a fashion that informed, accountable joviality, then it would put them at ease. It would break the tension. It would reassure them that I'm currently in a safe space.
Yeah.
Comedy has that amazing strength to it that means that you need some sincerity, some knowledge. You need that lived experience. You need to be very clear about the boundaries of the joke, of what is the butt of the joke, where is the joke coming from, what perspective, how informed is the perspective, who are you trying to belittle? Because comedy has power. That laughter will break down the big bad boss of the joke, and whether that's a societal construct or a particular individual or yourself, your own ego, or something else. There's always something that we're fighting against in a joke, however short form it is. Even if it's just a silly one-liner, there's going to be a butt of the joke. And I love that. I just love the intricacies, the details in the storytelling of something that seems so simple. But it's such a deft way of communicating with people. Changing their perspective in the most subtle and skillful ways when it goes right. When it goes wrong, it's abhorrent and awful and just ugh.
It's interesting there that you mentioned the release of performing and getting performing comedy, and you get a release from the audience's response. Normally when I speak to comedians, I ask them about going on stage, and they say about like how nerve-wracking it is. Do you still experience it that way, or are you eager for the release?
Both. It's not a dichotomy. Very much both. In depending on where I'm coming from that day, not necessarily geographically, but energetically, mentally. That's why the level of self-awareness is so key. Is what am I bringing to this conversation? Because it's always a conversation with the audience. The theatrics of the space as well, like how high is the stage, what am I wearing, what visual cues am I giving, how am I holding myself, how am I breathing, let alone the actual material, what's happened in the news that day, what's the weather like, what's the situation in the room, what's my lineup on where we're billing on the lineup, what's the last comedian been like, what's the MC been like, what's the especially particularly, how am I going to respond to those different energies in the room? And ideally, when you get to a certain stage, it's not just I'm going to go on stage and say exactly the same thing that I plan to say every single time. The bit that I hope I never stop learning is how to skillfully adjust and respond on stage, and have the confidence to do that, the self-assurance, again, having addressed anything I need to address within myself before I got on stage, and then having fun. It's all about play. We've got to be able to be playful on stage and play with the audience, know what your persona is, like what is it that people are going to assume about you before you start speaking. How can you quickly adjust that or play it in your favor as well?
Right. And you've had so many diagnoses, and you talk about them in your act. Do you find the audiences react? Because I know very little about mental health, having not been in that position. Do you find audiences will be more delicate, let's say? I don't know.
Well, I would challenge you firstly in that I think you do know about mental health, because we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health.
Certainly.
You have a physical body, you have a mind. You do. Listeners, I know that you can't see either of us right now, but I can assure you that there is a physical body in front of me of the lovely person that is Mark. You have the health of that physical entity. You have the health of your mental awareness.
Yes.
So we all have mental health just like we all have physical health. Some of us might develop a short-term mental health condition with the proper treatment and proper medication, or either both or you might hopefully have a full recovery from that. Some of us might develop a long-term mental health condition, or even a lifelong mental health condition, just like some of us might develop a lifelong physical health condition that we learn how to manage.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, part of what I live with.
Yeah.
But there's so many of us that have mental illnesses that are diagnosed or undiagnosed. There's every single one of us on the planet has good mental health days and bad mental health days. That's just the way that life is. So you know more about mental health than you might think you do. You might not know about the law about mental illness. You might not know about the specific diagnosis criteria or what it takes to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act. FYI, it's the legal phrase, you're deemed to be a danger unto yourself or others. That's the key phrase. And you have to have 3 people who know about it. It's 5 people. It's either 2 doctors, medically trained people, and 3 people who know you, or 2 people who know you and 3 medical professionals. One of the 2.
Okay.
One of the I'm not a doctor, but someone out there will be able to tell you. The key thing with all of it is that if you don't know something and you want to know it, you can ask questions. But the original question that you asked was mental health and my audiences and how they respond to it. So yeah, I have had a range of different responses. Again, much like with the previous discussion, it depends on where we are in the world, what the demographic is like, what lived experience those people are coming to the show with. It depends on a number of different factors. And I first started performing comedy over 10 years ago. And in the space of those 10 years, we've come so far as a society in understanding and accepting mental illness. And about 10 years ago, I was saying, when I was, flyering up in Edinburgh and trying to sell out, which we did do 4 years in a row, which was awesome. I would say things like, comedy has the power to break down barriers and increase understanding. If you're laughing, then you feel less alone. And I don't want anyone to feel alone, because I know the repercussions of what it feels like to feel completely isolated in this universe. There is that. We have had that for a while. I now live in London, and in the capital, there is a very different response to my material than there might be when I perform in Wales, in certain specific parts of Wales. Or at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, that's going to be different to me performing in Preston, or me performing in Nottingham is going to be different to me performing in Birmingham. And there's no judgment or comparison. It's just it's my privilege to be able to listen to the nuances, the differences between different communities, and what they're bringing. And I love it when I'm surprised and I have no idea what to expect of that audience. There's certain material I have about my mental health experience that I've kind of, I know it's my best bits. I've performed it enough times around the country, in Australia and New Zealand, and that material, I'm confident that people are going to get it. As a hit rate is high. It's a higher probability that there's going to be decent laughs. People are going to respond well to it, especially things like my material about the stigma, because the butt of the joke there is, look at this stupid thing this stupid person said, except they're not stupid, they're just ignorant. But let's laugh at the ignorance that is still out there, and it's my job to find your way into understanding why that ignorant comment is ignorant. For example, let's say one of my jokes is I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh, you can't be ill, you don't look ill." Well, you don't look rude, but here we are. Now, that's the beauty in that joke is that it points out the idiocy in assumptions, in making any assumptions. So it's not specifically saying this specific person was an idiot for saying that. Isn't it silly that us as humans make those snap decisions about each other? So more recently, I've been hungry. I've got this insatiable appetite. I've got a number of different insatiable appetites. I have a history of eating disorders, and also very active on Hinge. But I have this appetite for knowledge, for also pushing my creativity forward. I have to keep learning, consuming, expressing, creating. Otherwise, my energy just gets really dense, and I become ill mentally, I think. So I need to keep learning and creating and expressing. When it comes to my comedy, that's that's wonderful, but it means I want to keep pushing the conversation forward. Like, we're so aware of mental health now. I feel like even in the places that I go, and they're not sure whether to laugh or not about me being sectioned in with the jokes, whereas, you know, other communities are like, they're fully with me. They're like, great, let's laugh at, like, of course we accept this, let's move on. It's the difference is that I want to start moving the conversation forward beyond awareness. Even in no matter what community I'm performing in, people are at least aware of this perception of mental health conditions. Yes. Maybe they are still in a community where it's perceived as shameful to have a mental illness, right. And that's my role, is to hopefully move that conversation forward for them and be a figurehead in some way that can at least open up that conversation a little bit, I hope. But there's other conversations to be had, such as the lack of mental health services, the fact that neuroscience it is the reason why we have mental health conditions. So let's arm ourselves with more knowledge and more tools to understand how our brains work, how our physical bodies work, how our automatic nervous systems work, how we can be more adept at understanding trauma, although trauma is being blamed left, right and centre for things that are just not trauma related right now. We have a lot of tools out there at our disposal. Attachment disorder is something that's being talked about a lot, and there's this consumption of it that I'm observing in social media, as well as in my own personal desire to create work around these conversations. It's really important that we're also aware that we're not commercializing or capitalizing this as a hashtag or a box ticking or the commercialization of it. I'm concerned about. Sorry, I'm darting around all over the place because there's so much to discuss. But I would say that the latest work that I've been writing has been trying to talk about the boundaries that I think that we're currently need to discuss to move the conversation forward around mental health. So I've had therapists come up to me after my shows recently saying, thank you so much. I've been trying to teach my clients about attachment theory or about polyvagal theory, and now I've heard you talk about it and I'm laughing. I want all my clients to come and see these shows so that we can have that common ground of understanding so that we can move forward. And I love that. I want it to keep moving forward in that way where we're not... We've normalized the conversation. Well, I feel like we have worked very hard in the last 10 years to normalize talking about being diagnosed with a mental illness. Right. Great, that's wonderful. Now, can we please either be given the funding, ideally both, the funding for proper restructuring of services, and can we also be talking about the latest developments in understanding how to treat ourselves? I've been monologuing at you for a very long time about a number of different subjects.
Oh, absolutely. Well, tell me then about your ambassadorship organisation you're representing. Who are they? What do they do? What do you do for them?
I'm an ambassador for the mental health charity Rethink Mental Illness. They are a sister charity to the charity Mind. I was asked a few years ago, I think 2015 maybe, 2015, to be an ambassador for them. They, as a charity, firstly, are fantastic people. Everyone I've ever met who's worked there, they are passionate. They have lived experience. In terms of different charities, there's a myriad of different charities out there for different mental illnesses, specific illnesses, and different aspects of the mental health field. Rethink, they kind of package themselves as being about legislation and also about the more acute, those who experience the more acute, and that's, language is clunky. I don't like the term acute, but it's hard to explain otherwise. People who might have been sectioned, for example, and people who might experience the kinds of mental illness and mental illness experiences that could ostracize them from society. That's my phrase, not theirs. just in case I've got that slightly wrong. The way that I perceive it is that they aren't afraid to talk about the things that some other charities don't address as directly. So their role is to hold space for those more extreme. I don't like the word extreme because it's not extreme for me. It's just perhaps slightly more rare.
Okay.
I think that the more extreme, this is linking it back to comedy again, the more extreme the experience, the greater the expansion of consciousness, the greater the learning, with proper reflection and proper support. With comedy, as with mental illness, both of them tread the boundaries between what's acceptable in society and what's unacceptable in society. Classic mythology figures like the gods of mischief, like Loki or Pan, or anyone, a Puck, even any of them that are going to tread the boundaries between, like they're border control between what figureheads and archetypes in society are completely accepted and a part of the system, part of the structure, and what lies beyond that. And that's where the laughter comes, is the tension, is where are we falling on that line? Where does it fall? Similarly with mental illness and perhaps something like being sectioned under the Mental Health Act or having hallucinations like I have experienced in the past, those things tend to be feared. Much like with many other disabilities or physical disabilities, they're feared because they confront our very notion of what it means to be human, what it means to be sane, what it means to be alive. So someone talking about, I've had hallucinations, I've seen these things that no one else can see or hear, it brings up a visceral response of fear in people because they don't understand it. Much like they might not understand somebody who has a physical condition that is different to theirs. It's a different perspective, a different physical perspective. But much like we're sitting here and I'm staring at a wall behind you right now and you can't see that wall, does that mean that wall doesn't exist? Just because I can see it and you can't? And behind me right now is some stuff that I can't see, but it doesn't mean that you can see it right now. I could explain to you what it's like, that wall behind you.
Yes.
Just like somebody who has a physical health condition might be able to explain to you, this is my perspective of my experience of the world. Yeah. It's perhaps fearful when you're kind of confronted with that, like, hang on, let's question these things. But only through questioning and exploring those boundaries are we going to strengthen our collective understanding of what it means to be human. Yeah. And comedy does that without it being as with a lot of play and a lot of laughter, rather than the way that I'm explaining it to you right now, which perhaps is a little bit more weighty for some people, using puns that are all to do with my mental health eating disorder experience as well. I've been a size 4 and a size 20 due to eating disorders. I've experienced being in this world in very many different physical forms. I'm aware that the way that we're perceived can vary dramatically.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you then about something I often ask, which is the on-stage persona. How much of that is you? Is that a mask that you wear? Are you the same person when you go on stage as when you're talking to me today?
No, I'm not the same, because I can never be the same person. That's why I like rivers so much, because you can never step into the same river twice. I'm never the same person twice. Okay. So me right now talking to you, I'm not going to be the same me later on today. In terms of how I present on stage, we all wear masks. Okay. We all have different facets of ourselves that we present to the world. Mm-hmm. I think part of being a performer is to be aware of that and to harness it, and to channel it. I mentioned earlier about the non-verbal cues. So I very much have a costume that I will wear. There's clothing choices and makeup choices that I purposefully harness on stage so that I can step into that, I'm going to say other, but it's not removed from me. It's just coming in from the same source, yes, but channeled in a different direction. Okay. So a bit like if you imagine kind of like a starburst, kind of like there's lots of energy in the middle, there's lots of light in the middle. You've got different fronds going out, different spikes going out. And if I'm on stage, then it's a way for me to harness that energy, pushing it in one particular direction. And a part of that will be very bright colours in my outfit choices. Probably a slogan t-shirt. Love me a slogan t-shirt. Probably a lot of glitter. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but always some sort of glitter. Whether that's in sequin form or in my makeup. A bit Bowie-esque. Very much the Bowie colours. Jewel colours and glitter and sparkles. It's partly to let the audience know. I'm a bit of a, what's the word? Well, it's using some, I want to say clowning because people will understand what I mean by that. Like the clowns wear makeup as a mask, but a mask only gives us permission to look behind the mask and with more honesty. I might walk around with no makeup on today and it's giving me a different way of being without a mask. I want to be authentic at all times, but being able to step into the strength that it takes to handle being on stage, a little bit of armour is necessary. And that armour is a way of me being able to be more authentic with the audience, to have the strength to harness that energy of all of them and give myself permission to let them know, I've got this, I'm strong enough, this glitter is going to speak volumes. There's nothing to be feared here. The bright colours are here. I'm not getting on stage. If I got on stage in a black hoodie and black jogging bottoms and talked about how I have mental health conditions, that's going to be a very different visual cue to me getting on stage with glitter and bright makeup and a big smile and a kitsch slogan t-shirt that says "Babes Empower Babes" or what's the other one? Oh, Brains are the New Tits is one that I bought recently. And I think when you saw me perform, I was wearing a t-shirt that said "Strong Female Lead."
Yes.
I've got this. Like this, I know it's literally wearing a message on my chest and saying, "This is me. This is me talking about, oh, I've got mental health conditions and I've been sectioned is not the only thing that defines me. Look at all these other things that we're constantly distracting and deflecting and having fun with." I love that. That's part of the creativity. That's part of the art. It's part of the theatre of comedy. Not every comedian does that. Not every comedian comes from that place. But for me, I love playing with all of those different aspects of who I can be on stage. I have played with getting on stage with no makeup and less of a showy outfit. It doesn't work for me. I have so much energy. I have my friends will tell you I have too much energy. The guys I've been on dates with recently will tell you I have so much energy. Some of them can handle it, some of them can't. If I'm on stage, that energy needs to be very specifically harnessed and channeled. And it's my favourite place because I've learned how to, I think, hopefully do it reasonably well. I'm not going to say every single time it's a complete 10 out of 10 hit, but you know, it's the likelihood is better and better all the time.
Well, I mean, sellout runs at Edinburgh, award nominations. I mean,
award winning.
I've won. I said awards and award nominations.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Sorry. That was my inner child came out there and was like, "Oh, please don't forget that I did actually win some as well." Oh yes, sweetheart. We know. Don't calm down, ego. Yes, thank you. I have
all very justified. What does that mean to you? Winning awards or being nominated for awards?
None of it means anything without a lovely audience to enjoy the show the next time.
Yeah.
What it means is a moment of recognition, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And I can revisit those moments, especially post-pandemic.
Yes.
I haven't been back to Edinburgh since before the pandemic. I just can't afford it. Even selling out, we as comedians, I lose money even if I sell out.
Yes.
I will lose money on all the costs, the venue hire, the marketing costs, the travel costs, the accommodation costs. There's so many other myriad of costs, as well as the fact that I'm taking time out of other work for a month to go to Edinburgh. Like, there's very few jobs that will allow you to do that. So you have to make those choices. Things like corporate gigs are not picking up post-pandemic. So normally, pre-pandemic, it would be I'll speculate to accumulate situation of I'll go there, I'll do this, then I'll pick up corporate work. That hasn't recovered. Because people aren't back in the offices so much, and there's lots of factors to consider. The awards and nominations, the award wins, the award nominations, the sellout shows, the 5-star reviews, they mean so much in terms of recognition for a moment. They also mean I can put them on my posters moving forward, so no one can ever take that away from me or from the marketing of what it is that we're packaging and offering, which then ultimately is just energy going back into selling. It's all about selling an idea. So people see a poster and they see, oh, look at, there's that newspaper gave 5 stars. That newspaper gave, that website gave that particular pull quote. That particular year she won that award. That particular year she was nominated for that award. Great. That might give that person looking at that enough faith that they're likely to have a good time. It's not guaranteed, but they're likely to be rewarded for their risk of, I'm going to spend £10, £5, whatever cost that ticket is, to go to that show. They then have given me their time, and they want to get the reward of having a great time and maybe learning something, laughing and learning. That would be great. That's up to me to then hopefully give them back everything. So it's constant transaction, a cyclical transaction. Yes. So what does having award nominations or wins or 5-star reviews, sellout runs, it means that is a moment to press pause in that circle of transaction. Say, right, how are we going to take that energy, that moment, and move it forward and push it into that inertia to keep that going again and have that conversation again, or a new conversation, to keep moving our dialogue around comedy, mental health, my experience, our collective experience on this planet forward. And I guess some people would probably come on your podcast and talk about how they know how to do satire. I don't know how to do satire. Politics and I everything is political, but also everything's transcends beyond that as well. Yeah. I don't know how to do satire. I do know I guess some people think that what I'm talking about, the way I'm talking about it, might be the word spiritual might come to mind. I don't know if that's the right word because it puts people off. That particular word. If we're going to go with that word, then instead of a political comedian, I might be a spiritual comedian. I love the fact that comedy points out the absurdities of just being a human. Being a human is so... Am I allowed to swear, Mark? Yeah. It's so fucking bizarre. It's so fucking weird being in this body and having to put energy in the form of kcal into my body and then expend that and putting energy into the form of my body in terms of light and in terms of learning and this appetite I mentioned. I've got an appetite for energy. I give a lot of energy. I get a lot of energy. I'm very sensitive to energy. And all of that just confuses me beyond. So any way that I can harness it and give myself space between to play and vibrate and reverberate and be silly. I mean, having a laugh literally is this beautiful vibration in your own body, in your solar plexus kind of area. Your diaphragm is going to make some beautiful vibrations, massaging us from the inside. It's going to be soothing. It's going to be fun. It's going to be this collective church-like experience where everybody's laughing in a room. And we're breaking down, hopefully, some big bad bosses in society or in ourselves. It's the beautiful, most wonderful collective consciousness experience that I think anyone can have. Yeah. And when it goes well, when it goes horribly and I die on stage, then it can feel horrific, but it's still better than not doing it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, seeing you there talking about when it goes well, and you lean back a little bit and your eyes close, there's a smile. You're revisiting that moment. what is that feeling when it doesn't go well? What does that look like?
It used to be all-consuming and like I never wanted anybody to see me ever again, and like I'd lost my purpose. I now understand it to be something different. That back then, that was before I'd done a lot of work on myself. Now it's more likely to go well than less well. Mm-hmm. I'm better at understanding my internal world, my internal responses to that. So my inner critic used to be huge. I now understand that she was only ever born out of a need to protect. So I was trying to protect myself from an early age. So she gained power in that pursuit. But she actually would much rather be a good part of my inner parent. So whenever she rears her head and starts being super critical, hypercritical of me, I now have a better understanding of her and a way to rechannel her internally to be like, well, we can learn from this. Yeah. We can waste so much time in life just beating ourselves up for fucking up, but you can't learn without fucking up. So if I fuck up on stage, it's never a proper failure. It's never a proper fuck up. It's never a beat yourself around the head with it, because I did that for years, beating myself up for any time things went wrong. Yeah. I just wasted time doing that. That's another way of being of keeping yourself safe, is just staying stuck. I'm done with that now. I've got so much more to do and so much more to consume and to give. I now, if I fuck up, it's a beautiful gift, because I can learn from it if I do the proper work on myself. Yeah. So, for example, there was a recent gig where, which shall remain dateless and nameless and locationless in this conversation. However, I do remember having that feeling of, that could have gone better. Great. What can I learn from that experience? Let's come off stage and go, right, what hadn't I done in advance of it? What would I do if I could do it again? What were the visual cues that I was giving that perhaps I would adjust? How could I better prepare? And how could I better handle it on stage? And all of those things I've done, which means that I have more information to move forward and tackle the next opportunity with more information, and information is power.
Yeah. You mentioned you're not a satirist, we know.
I might not say, I wouldn't bill myself as a political comedian. I'm not Nish Kumar. I'm not going on stage and saying, right, I'm here to attack this particular.
That's where I was going. Yeah.
But I do have a lot of material that does attack the imbalances, the fact that we don't have enough funding for mental health services, the fact that we need reform, we need change. I absolutely call for reform. Yeah. I just hope that the way that I do it doesn't make any one individual or one part of society to blame.
Okay.
Because I think there's a lot of segregation, a lot of separation, and I think that we've lost the ability to healthily and respectfully hold space for different tribes, and the tribal attitude of I belong with this group, to the segregation, the separation, the alienation of this other group. That is something that concerns me, because while I think there's a lot of fun to be had, a lot of fun in comedy to be had with making. I mean, look, let me cards on the table. I'm very clearly not right wing, but I know people who are, and those people are not bad or evil or wrong. They just have chosen to vote in a different way to me. Right. And if I want to have a discourse with them, I would rather hold space to ensure that they're not going to run away from that opportunity. It doesn't mean that we have to hide from the failures of the system that is currently in place. And there's so much systemic failure. There's so much systemic racism, so much systemic segregation, ableism, sexism, all the isms. There's a lot of people who would say that those things are the way they are and they can stay as they are. I would disagree with that. I think we can move forward. But I also believe passionately that no matter where in this particular lifetime, in this particular world, you have been born into a particular place, in a particular body. The fact that my face is symmetrical is a happenstance of DNA. It's nothing to do with me, the effort I've put into. I didn't put effort into my bones growing in this particular way. They just have. I can put effort into shaping my mind and moulding my experiences and what influenced me. I had no particular say in what family I was born into, in what location, what country. But I can shape consciously with intention where I devote my time now, where I spend my time, where I want to meet you. We've met today in this particular location, which I suggested because I really like the people who run this establishment. So I was like, right, I know this is good energy here. We're going to have an opportunity for a safe space to chat, and we won't be disturbed. And lo and behold, hopefully we haven't. But I guess the point I'm trying to say is, whilst I wouldn't say that I'm a political comedian, I do have political beliefs. That isn't the most overarching message I'd want to give on stage or in my life. We are human. Being human is absurd, no matter which way you vote. We all have absurdities that we face and difficulties we face emotionally, philosophically, mentally, financially for some of us, not for others. That's a problem that can divide. But I want to find the thing that unites. And if there's ways that I can focus on what unites the most far right-wing person in my audience and the most far left-wing person in my audience, I would rather find those few beautiful moments without betraying where I think comedy and my own personal comedy can push us politically and societally. I would rather find also some way of finding the common humanity beyond that, which transcends. Because comedy can transform people. You can leave a show. When I start trying to write my hour-long shows, I usually start with a ridiculously ambitious topic, which most people that I work with, my agent included, will be like, okay, you sure you want to try to tackle it? Like, yes, I do. I really want to. I'll start with a big topic, and then like the main thing that I'll start with is, how do I want people to feel when they leave? What do I want them to be thinking? What do I want them to be feeling? But it's got to be the feeling more than anything. And from there we start creating it.
I like that. And I've said before on this podcast and to comedians, I never remember the content specifically of shows because I go to see a lot of shows. Sometimes they blur into one. But I remember the way they make me feel when I walk out, when I leave, and I get the feeling for the show. And I kind of think the message kind of gets in there subliminally. But I come away with a positive feeling and a charge. And it's interesting that you mentioned it kind of in that way there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you do. You are electrified by the person on stage.
Yes.
If a person is making you laugh, it's the quickest way to change your perspective on something. And whether that's a setup to a political gag that gives you the gift of an easy an opening, a soft opening into a new perspective, a new understanding, a new way of explaining something to somebody. If you were already with the comedian, as in you already agreed with the point they're making, but they are giving you a new way of communicating a point that you were trying to understand within yourself. That's such a joyous gift to give. Or you might come away with an understanding of something that you'd never experienced before. Perhaps that might be more likely in my shows because my experiences have been a bit less common. You know, not everyone's been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. Not everyone's experienced hallucinations. Not everyone's experienced the diagnoses or medications or the stigma. That's great. What I find fascinating though is that that's not the only thing I talk about. And I had a gig on Wednesday where I was emceeing, and I absolutely did the mental health stuff in there, but I also did a bunch of stuff about my recent Hinge dates. And it's great because as long as they know the bedrock of the foundation of my mental health history, then great, boom, we're off with it. I'm able to joke around about these guys that I'm meeting, their responses to my history, their responses to me as who I am. I mean, I'm just a big ball of energy, and I think on my Hinge profile at the moment I've got something about how I'm like Rogue from the X-Men. Dating me is like dating Rogue from the X-Men, the 1990s comics and kids TV version, because I've got a great set of friends and a banging theme tune, a dark past, and a lot of energy and a lot of excitement. And then it's also a gift to the hot nerds out there to know that I might just drain all your energy, absorb your memories, and then leave you in a coma. But that's only for the hot nerds who understand.
Fair enough. I don't know how to respond to that. You mentioned about the pandemic. What was your pandemic experience in terms of comedy and not being able to perform? What were your Zoom appearances like, that sort of thing?
Not just Zoom, WebEx, Teams, Twitch. The pandemic was absolutely gut-wrenching. It involved a lot of loss. I was in the middle of my second UK national tour that was Arts Council funded. It took a very long lead time. It took years to get that show written, funded to be written by the Arts Council, written, previewed, performed at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. We were already booking the tour well before the Fringe. The funding for the tour, the marketing for the tour. Mm-hmm. And then for my third date of the tour, first lockdown happened. And it was, we all lost a lot, and there was a lot of grief. My pandemic involved the loss of that tour. We repurposed the money for the tour into creating video content that then we still have. I still think is beautiful work. I did a lot of Zoom gigs. I worked with Next Up Comedy, doing some monthly shows on a Twitch. I then started trying to go in, and I said earlier on before we started recording, do or do not, there is no try, said Yoda. So I just caught myself saying, and with consciousness, I tried to do Twitch. I came up against my own challenges with technology. Right. Other comedians I know were trying so hard to help me and guide me. Suze Kempner, big shout out. She's incredible. I love her so much. She mastered Twitch. She mastered green screen. I invested in green screen. I tried doing Twitch. I got a lot of trolls. And I was also going through a difficult time with a relationship that was breaking down. We were in a very small flat with a third person. It really wasn't big enough for two people, let alone three. There was so much uncertainty, so much instability, insecurity within myself. I was constantly chasing that mirror self through social media, through these online shows I was trying to do, constantly trying to search for my purpose, search for my audience, search for validation that actually was all stemming from unmet childhood needs that I needed to meet in myself. And my relationship breaking down during that time also meant that I was very confused in which direction to turn, where to put my energies, who to put my energies to, as well as, hang on, where's my income coming from? I don't know where my future's going. When I say it was heartbreaking, I really mean it. I lost that relationship. And the gift of it is that sometimes we need a forest fire to have any real regrowth. And I came off social media after the end of that relationship. I decided to not continue doing, for the moment, Twitch streams. I loved doing online virtual gigs with Zoom. A lot of my shows have multimedia elements, so being able to screen share, keep that energy going, so it's not just me talking to you like it's TV. I loved the fact that with my acting background, I understood the difference between performing to camera versus performing on stage. And I used that knowledge and expertise to do mental health training during that time as well for groups, as well as doing the online gigs. But then there came that point where people were Zoom fatigued out. So I lost that income because it was constantly stop-starting of are we, aren't we, and always at the behest of what's the appetite, what's the demand. Yeah. at the same time as hearing my friends say how boring it was being on furlough. And I was thinking, I would love 80% of my income from before the pandemic. Please, thank you very much. And it took me 10 years of my life of prioritizing this freelance, unstable income and lifestyle. I prioritized that above everything else because I believed that it was worth the high risk, because it's high reward every time. And it's what I was born to do, I believe. To have that reflected in the government lack of funding again for the arts generally and comedy particularly was like the whole of society seemed to be screaming, you don't matter, your choices, the arts do not matter, we don't value you. And I kept thinking, where's my value? A lot of my journaling, a lot of my writing, a lot of my own internal work was, where do I place value in my life, in myself, in others? I did a lot of work on myself in the last year, very deep. I might have been in therapy for 23 years, but I had not done half as hard work as I have done in the last year. I've done a lot of reading. I've swallowed about 20 different textbooks. I then regurgitated them all and I basically did not have a personality for a good 6 to 9 months of my life in the last year. That personality's been coming back since about April or May this year. I've started learning how to have fun again, poke fun at myself, find my ego, point that out again. I'm having a lot more fun now. So to answer the question, how was the pandemic? It was brutal, awful, but transformative, and I'm excited to what it's going to lead to next, because I'm not ruling anything out. Just because Twitch didn't work back then doesn't mean it doesn't work now. However, I do see other avenues opening up now that I'm excited by, that I think I have more energy, even more energy, but now with more tools and more self-assurance to not only explore those options, but really galvanize others and charge down those options when I actually decide this is where I'm going, this is the right avenue to go down. Nothing's going to stop me anymore.
What is next? We've seen Juliette the comedian, we've seen Juliette the writer, seen Juliette the ambassador, Juliette the actor. What's next for Juliette?
Well, this week I'm working at a market stall. If anyone wants to come and buy stuff from me on a market, I mean, you made it sound very glamorous. Juliette the writer, Juliette the comedian, Juliette the ambassador. My life is not like that. I work at a market stall to pay my rent. I am going to be doing hospitality work. I have day jobs that are grounding, and they will teach me a lot. I just want to make that very clear, that it's not all high glamour. The most important thing for me is all of those have to leave space, hold space, be secure enough to give me space to always pursue what I actually am authentically here to do: comedy, writing, acting. For me at the moment, it's comedy high end, writing high priorities. I'm still doing mental health training as well. Constantly writing. I've got a couple of projects that I'm putting forward. I've got the show No Brainer that's going to be at the Nottingham Comedy Festival. It will be a couple of other festivals. I'm going to be emceeing, doing gigs around the country. Constantly writing the new material for those gigs, but at the same time I've got other bigger projects. I say bigger projects. I've got the culmination of work coming together. So there's a podcast with Hat Trick Productions that's coming out as well, called Not So Lonely Planet, which I'm very excited by. We started recording that in November 2020, and I love it so much. It's so great. It's the idea is that it's an exploration into how connected we are on this planet. So each episode I meet a different nerd, a different person who has an absolute passion for a specific thing, because my thing's comedy. But I'm also a nerd. I'm a complete and utter fucking nerd. And I love meeting people who have that life-affirming passion that makes them want to get out of bed every morning, because they are so passionate. They found this thing that makes them want to be a human, makes them want to live. And that energy is burning bright within them, and it galvanizes those around them. Just like I've been talking to you about comedy for me and what it's like being on stage. Yeah. So each episode I meet one of these beautiful little fucking nerds and we explore whatever thing it is that they're nerding out about. They enthuse me with that. By the end of the episode, they then recommend another nerd that has enthused them about a completely different subject. Yeah. And so it's this kind of weird conga line or like a pinball machine of like being bouncing around from one person to the next to the next to the next. And it's exploration. It's a travel show, but it's traveling into nerdery and fandom and geekery. So from anything from like knife making through to cheese, through to we've got people who are about cemeteries. We've got somebody who is geeking out to us about history of London. We've got nerdery about how many other things I'm trying to remember. There's so many. Oh, cricket, indoor social cricket. I hate sport. That was an interesting one. But it's all this kind of lovely open-minded exploration into, look, maybe we can't travel around the world as easily as we used to, or maybe some of us never would find it easy financially to travel around the world, but we can still travel, we can still explore, we can still consume with our voracious appetites. I need to learn, I need to grow, I need to expand and enthuse and find that life-affirming passion to make getting out of bed worthwhile. So we've got that. I've got a book proposal that I'm hoping is going to infuse and impassion and galvanize the publishers who hopefully might buy it, and that's all connected to women's agency, goddess culture and mental health. So exploring, well, I won't say more about that because it's still in development, but I hope you can tell how my smile has suddenly gotten really beaming. I get very excited when I think about it. So I'm gonna be exploring a bunch of fun things to continue creating. I'm probably gonna read a comic book later tonight. Probably gonna buy a bunch more comic books. I'm going to Comic-Con. I'll probably be posting pictures of me in cosplay there. I have my Rogue cosplay ready. You come to my shows. No Brainer is going to be, as I said, on a bunch of different festivals, and hopefully
Nottingham Festival. That's on the 11th of November.
The 11th of 11, 1111, all the ones, and anyone who's into numerology will know that means that my show will be on the 11th of November, 2022. That's what that means.
Where can we find out about all your projects? Where can we find out about information about you and what you're doing?
Well, there's my website as a kind of baseline, JulietteBurton.co.uk. That's JulietteBurton. You can find me on Twitter, Juliette Burton. I'm not on there half as much as I used to be. On Instagram, I'm a bit more frequent, Juliette_Burton. And on Facebook, I'm Juliette Burton, writer-performer. I try to manage my time on social media a little bit more boundaried now. But yeah, you can contact me via all of those, or you can contact me via the details on my website. But please go via my agent because, there's some healthy boundaries to be had. You can also support me on Patreon, and I would strongly recommend that you do because we have a beautiful little community there, and they are so lovely. You get to see behind the scenes footage. I post lots of hidden things of like the podcasts and stuff that I'm doing, and behind the scenes pictures. We do regular Zoom catch-ups and online games together. And some of my patrons have even come to my birthday party recently with my invitation. Like I invited them, they didn't just show up. And yeah, it's a proper little family there. So do find me Patreon. Just search Juliette Burton, JulietteBurton.
So finally, my last question, as always, what to you is comedy in a nutshell?
Comedy in a nutshell. Comedy is the truth wrapped in a lie.
Would you like to expand?
I'm always expanding. I have expanded and contracted more times than the British Empire, and I, just like the British Empire, I'm still working through a lot of shame and guilt. But no, comedy is the truth wrapped in a lie, because firstly, that when I was studying it at the National Film and Television School, that my wonderful tutor, Bill Dare, said that line, and I was like, that's exactly it. It's a way of sneakily telling people the truth, much like the fool in Shakespeare. The noble fool is my persona on stage. I hope to believe, or like some sort of my persona on stage you asked about earlier, but maybe noble fool mixed with over-enthusiastic supply teacher, mixed with Bowie, mixed with some sort of manic pixie dream girl. I'm not sure, but sneaking in the truth to in a way that is is socially acceptable because of the laughter. The lie is just the construct within which there's the nugget of truth, and it's the most beautiful gift to give and receive in that conversation with an audience.
Beautifully put. Juliette, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Thanks for listening to me ramble on with all those truths.